Hey, Jim Schultz back with you guys for the Greece Crash Course, and we are now into episode number 8, where we are going to cover a surefire crowd pleaser, the life of every party, Vomma. Do you guys remember how a couple of episodes back when we talked about charm, I said, hey, y'all might want to wait before you start selling those low delta strategies to maximize your charm? Well, the reason why is what you're about to learn with Vomma. So let's cover this guy in the same way that we have covered all the Greeks to this point. Let's talk about what it is. Let's talk about how let's talk about returns. Let's talk about risks. So without further ado, let's dive right into episode number 8 of the Greeks Crash Course, Vomma. Okay, so what is Vomma? Well, let's do this the only way that we know how, mathematically and intuitively. So mathematically, Vomma is another higher order Greek, but it's going to be a little bit of a downtick from what we saw in episode 7 with color, which was a third derivative. Vomma is actually in the same boat as charm or gamma, where it is only a second order derivative. And what it measures is it measures the change of vega when volatility changes. So remember that vega measures the change of option prices when volatility changes. Vomma measures the change of vega itself when implied volatility changes. Okay, so what about the intuitive side of Vomma? Well, to make things a little bit easier, Vomma actually shares the same relationship with options that vega did. Remember, when you're long options, you are positive vega. Well, when you are long options, you are also positive Vomma. When you're short options, you are negative vega. When you're short options, you are negative Vomma. But that positive negativeness to Vomma really only depends on which side of the market you're on. The most important thing for you to pull away from Vomma is that it is a positive function. Now, what does that mean in English? It's actually not too difficult to understand. Ceteris paribus, if implied volatility expands, then vega is going to expand because Vomma is a positive function. Ceteris paribus, if implied volatility contracts, then vega is going to contract because Vomma is a positive function. Now, does this mean that all Vommas are created equally? No, absolutely not, as we are going to see in the next couple of minutes. So how do we use Vomma at? As you've maybe noticed to this point, with charm and then color and now here Vomma, these higher order Greeks, they're not usually front and center on our radars. We don't typically use these guys super actively. But if you dig a little bit deeper, here's what you will find. All of the mechanics, all of the protocols, all of the things that we do every single day. Yes, we built these things from experience. Yes, we built these things from empirical research. But all along, there's been mathematics that have been driving the train. There's been mathematics that have been the foundation of what we do. And with Vomma, we're going to see the exact same thing in the next 2.5 minutes. So how do we use Vomma to improve our returns? Well, you know what's interesting about these higher order Greeks, at least the way that we view them and use them at very oftentimes, they either end up helping you on the return side or the risk side, not usually both. Like if we go back to charm, right, that was more of a return metric. If we go back to color, just in the most recent episode, that was more of a risk metric. We're going to see the same thing here with Vomma. It's also going to be a risk metric. And the reason why that is the case is because Vomma, by definition, measures how changes in implied volatility and the speed of those changes are going to impact us. Now, naturally, there is going to be a return element to Vomma. Like there is going to be a role that Vomma plays in determining our returns because vega impacts our returns through implied volatility, which implied volatility, of course, is one of the ways that we make or lose money as option traders. But we as tastylive, we're not super interested or concerned with the return side of Vomma. And the reason why is this. Remember, Vomma gives us insight into the speed of change of implied volatility. Vomma gives us insight into the risks that we have that are associated with the speed of change in implied volatility. In our game, when it comes to fast movements, when it comes to quick changes in the marketplace, we are more concerned with that on the risk side of the equation, not the return side of the equation. We're not super interested in making money very quickly. That's not our game. Instead, we want to use Vomma as a risk metric to help shield us from the big outlier losses, to help protect us from these big outlier moves. So Vomma, in our eyes, is very much more of a risk metric. So that brings us to our final section. Okay, so what about Vomma and risk? Well, again, as premium sellers, right, it's always going to be these big outlier moves that we need to navigate in order to be successful. And so Vomma is going to help us do that. It doesn't really impact us too much on the return side, but it can play a big role on the risk side, and here's how. First off, I think it maybe goes without saying, but just in case, as premium selling, we much prefer lower Vomma. This is because lower Vommas allow us to better control and mitigate and contain the speed of those changes in implied volatility. Okay, secondly, Vomma tends to peak right around the 5 to 10 delta options. So remember, Vomma is always a positive function, but there are layers, there are levels to the magnitude of Vomma across the different strikes, across the different deltas. Okay, lastly, because Vomma peaks for these lower delta options, this is why we typically don't prefer to sell these lower delta options, even though the charm is super high, even though the charm can be maximized at the 5 delta or the 7 delta or even like the 9 or 10 delta. We would much prefer to sneak into the 16 or 20 delta options with much lower Vomma and still plenty of charm that we can capture. And just like that, episode 8 is in the books on Vomma. That is it. That is all there is to it. If you wanted to share this video with one of your trader friends, that would be phenomenal. If you want to save this for future reference for yourself, that's also probably not a bad idea. And when you are ready, I will see you in the penultimate episode, episode number 9, where we are going to cover Vanna. We'll see you there.